Okay, so welcome. This is the very first movie review that I'm putting on a video, so let's see how this goes. The format for this is probably going to change, or hopefully it'll get better, I don't know, as I improve my editing skills and as I figure out what works and what doesn't work. So this is going to be very basic. It is probably going to be very primitive. It's just mostly going to be me talking. As I try to figure out ways of, editing and video processing and that sort of thing. So if, you got any tips, anybody, I would definitely appreciate it. So anyways, let's get straight into it. So the first movie, this is exciting stuff. The very first movie I decided to use for this channel is this movie called The Keeper. Yep, it is about the story. It is the story of Bert Trautman. So it's based on a true story. And it combines two things that I was really passionate about, history and soccer. So I thought this was a perfect way to start off things. It's a story about a German veteran of World War II. It's near the end of 1940, or the early 1945, near the end of World War II. He gets captured and sent to a POW camp in England. Well, he goes from this POW camp through his skills at soccer, actually playing the position of goalkeeper, which is where the name of the film comes from. He catches the eye of the local manager of St. Helens Football Club, is what I think, if I remember correctly, that was the name of the team. And this is where he rises to fame. And along the way, he meets a woman named Margaret, and they get married, they have a kid, well, I won't spoil any more of it. So there's the synopsis of it. I thought this was a pretty good movie. So some pros first. Let's get to the pros before I start getting overall thoughts. First, it is not a sports movie. Yes, it's about a goalkeeper. It is a biography. It is a biopic of sorts. It is the true story. This guy did actually live. He did to a point, because I'm sure they took some artistic liberties with the love story. They did do that a few times. But I did look it up. One of the biggest things that he's known for, and they include this in the movie, is playing through a cup final and winning a trophy with a broken neck. He breaks his neck during the game, and he finishes the game and does so well that, his team is able to lift the trophy at the end. So, absolutely wild story. I don't know. I can barely get up out of bed in the morning some days. I don't know how this dude played through. As in the position of goalkeeper, too, with a broken neck. Are you insane? Just wow. But it's not, like I said, the movie is not a sports movie. That is like a vehicle to kind of move the story along. And I mean, that is who he is, right, as a soccer player, but that it is not a soccer story, right? There are a lot of other things that are going on at the same time. So, yeah. And it does deal with, that's another one of the pros, is it does deal with some pretty serious stuff. It's not just like, kicking and screaming or Shaolin soccer. It's not, like I said, not a goofy little sports movie. But it does deal with things like PTSD, and then later on he loses a child, sadly. So it deals with, the trauma and the fallout from those pretty significant events, So that is, again, what sets it apart from being just a typical sports story. It's also not a typical war movie. It deals with a lot of the consequences and, like what they have to deal with in the fallout of war when they come back home. And also it deals with kind of, and we'll get to this as well a little bit later, the othering of the enemy, because people hated Bert when he first came to England just simply because he was German. He was different, and they didn't need to know anything else about the guy. That was enough for them, and they're just like, no, you're beneath us. So it talks a little bit, that's a pretty big theme of the movie, especially when it comes to the love story between him and Margaret, because she has to overcome that as well to, for that love story to work. Another one of the pros is actually the love story. I thought it was super wholesome. Yeah, I'm a big sucker for wholesome love stories. That's just who I am. I don't know how much of that was actually true historically. I don't know, if that is exactly how they met or how they got together. I don't know. They probably took a lot of artistic liberties in telling that part of the story, but I did really appreciate it. So if you liked that element in your movies, then absolutely, I absolutely rank that as a pro. Then the other really good thing I liked about it was that they trust the audience. The directors trusted the audience. So at the very end of the love story kind of phase, Bert and Margaret are sharing a moment in Margaret's bedroom. They're sharing their first kiss, and it's at night, so they imply that they sleep together. And then the next morning, the camera pans from the window and it passes by the nightside stand. And what's on there? It's a wedding dress and a tuxedo. And then it pans to them in the bed. So it's like skipped a huge amount of time, but it does so in a way. They've already done the heavy lifting, so to speak, of the love story, right? So they've gotten together, they've told each other how they feel, and then, oh, hey, now they're married. And it felt natural. Like, it did skip a lot of time, but it didn't feel rushed at all. And, you know, if there was nothing else to tell, I'd much rather they, like, just go straight to that and then drag it out and, you know, make it lose its charm. So I really did appreciate that. And also, like I said, trusting the audience. They really didn't talk too much about the wedding, but it was just implied. And then boom, you're moving on. You didn't have to tell the audience about that. They didn't spend a huge amount of time. They just showed you the picture of the wedding dress and the tuxedo on the nightside stand. I'm assuming from the night after their wedding. And then boom, you know, we're moving on. And nobody's complaining. So that's good. Having said that, there are some cons to the movie. So going back to, and it kind of goes along with the pros, or some of the pros of the movie, because the love story takes so much of the focus of the movie. And also the soccer elements of things. I know I said it's not a soccer movie, but obviously, I mean, Bert Trautman is a fairly well-known, particularly for Manchester City fans, which is where he goes later on in his career. But he's a fairly well-known goalkeeper. And those two elements take up a lot of time in the story, which is fine. No problem about that. The only problem is that the elements, the other kind of more serious elements that they try to include in the story, so, you know, the veteran aspect of things, because they do show some fighting in the very beginning when he gets captured. The POW camp, there's a lot in the very beginning. There's a couple of scenes of him like interacting with other prisoners, with the, you know, prejudiced prisoner of war camp wardens. And yeah, so it goes from that. And then there's also this storyline, I don't know how true this is, of the trauma. He's getting a lot of PTSD of a child that he could have saved but chose not to. And I actually think they did a pretty good job with that storytelling element. However, it just, because the kid keeps popping up all over, like, wherever he goes, and it didn't feel right for the story, just because they didn't give it its due time. Like, if you're going to include that, that's great. This is a good and potentially a really good storytelling element, but they just didn't really seem to give it all that much time, and I don't know how much it really worked anyways. I think they did it, and I don't know, again, I don't think Trautman ever talked about that sort of thing, so I don't know how, like, realistic or, you know, accurate it is. But I think they made that trauma storyline because of the fact that he loses his kid later on in the movie, and that's another storyline that is great, and it's very influential to his life, and it's very important in his life, obviously. But they don't really, I mean, it's just kind of like thrown in there, and then, oh, roll credits. Like, oh, hello. You know, they got to the moment, I think, honestly, if they had stopped, because they really did kind of throw a bit of a finale after Manchester City won the FA Cup, when in the game that Bert broke his neck and won the game. I think there was a lot of fanfare, there was a lot of celebration. I feel like you probably could have ended it there, and then maybe, you know, like in biopics, like how they love to show that pictures of the actual person and be like, you know, this person went on to do this, and then this person did this. I feel like they could have shown the loss of the child in that moment instead of, because the last 20 minutes, it just feels weird, because you have the trophy lifting scene, and then the kid is involved in the car crash, and then roll credits. And it's like, and they bring in an element of the tension that was involved between him and his wife as well, which obviously, I mean, you know, makes sense that you lose a child. That's obviously going to be a huge portion of, you know, tension between you and your significant other. So, but again, it's just they put that in there and then roll credits. So I think it's really good. There are really, really important elements to his story there, but I just don't think they've included so much, and the love story and the soccer takes up so much oxygen that I don't think the other more serious aspects get the necessary breathing room. Because I think specifically in the POW camp, his experience there, because he has to deal with like actual Nazis and German nationalists there too. And so, people that he doesn't necessarily agree with the whole way through. And, they get, there's some prisoner inter-prison fighting as well. So that right there, that element of his story could be a whole movie in itself, right? But it's a very brief little like spattering of images, spattering of scenes occasionally ever so often. There's also a scene he's supposed to, I guess his like friend within the POW camp, this character named Holthouse. And Holthouse, he is found dead a little bit about 30-40 minutes into the movie. And obviously Bert's torn up about it. But as a viewer, I really wasn't, because they didn't really explain why Holthouse was what's the word? Important to Bert. Like I don't know why he was significant to Bert's story, except for just him being his friend within the POW camp. That's it. But it really didn't have any effect on me, because they moved along pretty quickly from him to get to the love story between Bert and Margaret. So overall, I think it's a good, not great movie. It's not your typical war/sports movie. I think that honestly, the best thing I can take from this is if you can actually remove the way, and I was thinking about this as soon as the movie ended, if you remove the violence in the very beginning, because it does, and it kind of feels a little out of place, like the gore in the very first part of the movie, because it's just like that level of gore doesn't show itself in the rest of the movie. And it's like, wow, okay. So if you remove that, and then you remove the very end with the story about, or the, plot line about him losing his kid, you remove those two elements of things, honestly, you've got a great Hallmark film. You have got a great romance story. Because honestly, the synopsis is fascinating. Yeah, it's a German POW goalkeeper who rises to stardom after overcoming prejudice and, hatred towards himself. Yeah, like, he becomes a star in English soccer after being a German POW. Like, that's fascinating. And then he won a trophy with a broken neck. Like, are you kidding me? That's insane. So, it's a fascinating story. But I just think that a couple of the more serious elements, they didn't give enough light to. Or, like I said, if you'd cut it out, it's a great romance story. And honestly, it would have been a fantastic Hallmark film, because it's like I said, super wholesome. So overall, I think that if the synopsis interests you, if this review hopefully interests you, then I recommend watching. And even if it doesn't, watch the trailer. Because the trailer is really good, and I watched it, I was hooked into it. So watch the trailer. If the trailer doesn't hook you, or if the trailer does fascinate you, then I would absolutely recommend you watch it. If it doesn't, then maybe, don't. So, like I said, overall, good, not great. I did enjoy it. Am I going to watch it again? Probably not. But I'm glad I did. So, yeah. Anyways, I think that's all I want to say about that. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in to the first video. This is going to be a wild journey. I hope you're along for the ride. We'll see where this goes. So, have a good time.